Before I begin today's video, I wanted to let you know that StarCraft, which is what you're looking at here, does not support ultra-wide. So my normal 3440 by 1440 goodness is instead truncated to 2560 by 1440. Most of you probably don't care, but it's something that I wanted to mention. This is a really fun game mode that is part of the StarCraft arcade, so I'm just going to let it run in the background. The whole idea is to survive, and you'll see how far I make it. All right, so what I wanted to talk about today was a couple things, actually, but it's really related to kind of the next generation of some of the technology that we're beginning to see announced or teased as largely part of CES. So when E3 kind of fell by the wayside, the big annual industry trade show fell with it too. And while E3 was a great place to see new games from the big three, it was also a really good testing ground to see some of the new hardware and technological innovations that were going to kind of follow suit. And with E3 gone, you really don't have that space anymore. Yes, you still have your state of plays and your, what do they call it, Inside Directs or the Inside Xbox Showcase and the Nintendo Switch Directs, where they will focus on their specific stuff. But a lot of times those are more game focused, and you don't really get a deep dive into a lot of the hardware or peripherals. So you kind of have to limp along with little bits and nuggets of information that you'll pick up on third-party vendors at trade shows. The only real trade show that's worth anything anymore, that where you're really going to see a big thrust into the technological space, is going to be CES, the Consumer Electronics Showcase, which is going on this week in Las Vegas. And if you're like my wife, you get to be there. Not me, unfortunately. Maybe next year. I'd love to go and check it out. But finding little nuggets of information, little drips and drabs of things coming out, does paint an interesting picture for what we can expect to see going into next year. And you always have ways to get leaks and rumors, whether it be directly from the source or journalists. A lot of times it comes from patents, and even more so lately, it comes from bum listings that big box stores will tease inadvertently, or they'll say something, or there'll be a SKU that's suddenly on their website for an unnamed product, or something that kind of lets you deduce what's happening. So the kind of leak industry is actually a very fun one to kind of solve and navigate through, because you don't really have a single source of good information, and so you just kind of piecing together and hobbling together what is happening. So lots of interesting little tidbits came out. That's the reason I'm doing this video today, was to talk about a few of them. The first was that the Sony DualSense Edge, my favorite controller, my new daily driver that has shockingly replaced my Xbox Elite Series 2, which I never thought in a million years this would happen, by the way. My daily driver, I plugged it into it's actually sitting right here on my computer desk in front of me. I play every single possible thing I can on this thing, with the exception, obviously, of Game Pass games on my PC. I love this thing. The biggest criticism has been the battery life. Battery life lasts, they said 6 hours when I bought it. That was kind of the promotional material. And I think they even did a little bit of wordsmithies, and they said it could be up to 6 hours. But it definitely was not the experience I think that a lot of us wanted, especially when you looked at how amazing the DualSense 4 controller was at holding battery charge. So when the DualSense Edge comes out and it's a really low battery life, we complain, but we buy it because it's so amazing. But you pretty much have to hardwire it. I mean, you're only going to I'm getting on average, I'm going to say 2 hours of game time with it unplugged. It's basically a wired controller. For my particular setup that I have both downstairs and upstairs in my man cave, I have plenty of long USB-C cables, so I just plug it right in. It's of no concern, and I'm able to constantly have it on. Granted, you're tethered, but I don't really sway wildly with a wireless controller, so it doesn't really matter to me so much that there's a cord hanging out on the front end of the controller that's tucked into some sort of other device where I get power or connectivity, right? However, we did hear today, there are rumors that the DualSense Edge 2 is coming out soon, and it will have absolutely no major upgrades to it with the exception of a better battery, which I think is insane to me that they are. I mean, I'm sure they're going to say response time has increased or there's less Bluetooth interference with other devices or it's more responsive. But it really, from what I can have seen online, from online listings, from what I have seen of other people talking about and leaking, it's pretty clear to me they're just hyping up a better battery life, which is a little frustrating that Sony continues down this path of early adopter technology kind of paying the price. We saw this with the PlayStation VR, although I think it can be argued that PlayStation VR 2 definitely fell considerably flatter than anyone thought it would. However, early adopters once again pay the price. Early adopters once again are getting stuck with subpar products, but the trade-off is you get it first and you get to enjoy it because you buy it day one. I don't regret this purchase, by the way. If this truly is the only thing that is absolutely going to change, really high likelihood I am not going to be picking it up. I really can't see any reason why I would want to if it's solely battery life, because I have to keep it hardwired for my computer, and it's really not that big of a deal to have an extra cord tucked under the couch upstairs in my man cave. So that's the first piece. We'll see what ultimately comes of that, but I wanted to mention, I thought it was somewhat interesting that Sony has so quickly already come out with the Gen 2. And despite the fact there is so much modularity with this controller, the ability to swap out both left and right thumb pads in case there's any analog drift, it is very bizarre to me that you cannot replace the battery on your own easily. Now, maybe somebody will come out with some crazy aftermarket mod where you take the screwdriver and pop the case open and you're able to get some sort of updated battery in there. I don't know. Or maybe there is some crazy hardware or some sort of major technological advance that allows you to get better battery life out of a controller. I don't know. I just find it very odd that in 2024, we are still struggling with battery life on electronics. And I'm absolutely looking at you, Xbox. The fact that AA batteries are still kind of the preferred way to play your controller, unless you buy the rechargeable battery or you manage to buy a Pro controller, is slightly confusing to me. All right, so that's the first piece of hardware I want to talk about. I wanted to also mention that specs for the Nintendo Switch are starting to slowly leak out as well. Again, this is largely due to a lot of the third-party patents that Nintendo has. Nintendo does not make their own silicon. They go out and farm it out to various companies to build various chips, and they probably don't even do final assembly in plant, if I had to guess. I am sure they have another company who is collecting all of these various electronics, the plastic case, the buttons, the screen, all the little graphics cards, everything. And there's probably somebody somewhere who's doing kind of the final build, putting everything together. So it doesn't surprise me that, you know, when you take something outside of a single source, well, every single person that touches it is bound to spill the beans, so to speak. And it seems like that's exactly what's happening now with the Nintendo Switch 2, which we know is coming. Now, you're starting to see a lot of funny announcements. I saw this at CES first the other day. That's why I mentioned CES at the beginning, but I'm also seeing it again today. It's so odd to me that companies are now vocalizing their utilization of, how they're going to tie into upcoming platform releases. I'll give you an example. Game Shark. Do you remember Game Shark? The thing that hung out of your Nintendo Entertainment System. You got a little book of codes. I think it was called Game Genie at 1.2, and then Game Shark was the knockoff, or maybe I have them inversed. I don't know. But you remember that little program? Well, they're coming back. They're actually coming back with like a new gen of cheats, this time for Nintendo Switch. And what do they say in their press release? Well, we'll launch our new device in tandem with the Nintendo Switch 2 launch, which will be in September of 2024. Whoops. Well, that right there is a leak. We did not, while we knew Nintendo Switch 2 was probably going to make its way at some point down the horizon, a date was not specified. And that doesn't mean Game Shark, by the way, is the definitive keeper of all things Nintendo Switch, but it gives me pause to think that that is oddly specific of when we can expect to see the Nintendo Switch 2. So we're starting to see timelines leaked there, also through some of the patents that have released, also through some of the, as I said, some of the third-party partners as well. We're starting to get a little bit more information, and it does seem to continue the trend of a handheld. And it would make sense. I mean, the namesake of the Nintendo Switch is exactly that. You switch it up between a handheld and a docking mode. That makes plenty of sense. What it also indicates to me, though, is that Nintendo Switch will unfortunately remain underpowered again against its contemporaries, especially if PlayStation does, in fact, get ready to release a pro model of their console, or if Xbox does the same thing, release kind of like a mid-grade upgrade, you know, the Xbox 2X, I don't know what, Series X2, I don't know what their naming convention's so screwed up, but whatever it happens to be. The fact that the next-gen consoles are already looking to get more power out of their existing devices, and Nintendo is insistent on sticking into that very niche kind of mobile, not mobile market is very, very interesting to me. Now, reading through the specs, and I will not bore you with these, it is definitely considerably more powerful than the Nintendo Switch 1, which we would all expect. But unfortunately, it's definitely not anything that's going to blow us away in terms of next generation ray tracing computer goodness. It's more along the lines of a Steam Deck or the Asus ROG, where I have a feeling it's going to kind of be that level. Now, the good thing about that is it will indicate a lower price point, which I think Nintendo has realized over the years is their ticket into being a major competitor in the space. Think of how cheap the Nintendo Switch was compared to the launch. I'm sorry, the Nintendo Wii was compared to the launch of, say, the PlayStation 3, for example, where it was effectively half the price. Very hard to convince parents who are buying their kids a toy for Christmas that they need a more expensive console when there's a bright new shiny Mario game which looks great and costs half the price. So Nintendo seems to be sticking to that, which is a little disappointing to me. You know, there are so many aftermarket mods that have come out right now for existing Nintendo games that run at 4K and 60 frames per second and have ray tracing and M.2, basically instant, like non-loading time at all, modified games, very heavily modified games. And they look great. And one of the core reasons I actually stopped playing Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom was because the performance is just, it's hard to swallow. It does not hold a solid 30 frames per second. There's a significant amount of screen tearing and pop-in and quote-unquote jaggies from lack of any meaningful anti-aliasing. So you really kind of look at all of that and you go, oh boy. You know, so will the Nintendo Switch 2 come out and make all of our existing games look better? Well, at least on paper right now, yes, it will. It will look better. Will it be able to run games at a 60 frame per second mode? Will it be able to push to a higher resolution other than the kind of default 1080p that you currently see on Nintendo Switch? Well, those are great questions I don't have the answer to, but it is interesting to me that Nintendo is insistent on sticking with that style of console rather than going back. And I've always thought Nintendo should go back to a more permanent console. But we're starting to see some of those leaks drip out. I thought it'd be fun to talk about them in some capacity, kind of lump them together in a single video and just say, hey, you know, like, we're excited that something is happening. I'm excited that the market continues to find ways to evolve and give us news, even though E3 has dissolved, even though that, gaming leaks are becoming a very massive hunt and peck operation. There is still little tidbits and factoids of stuff out there, it's just fun to watch. So that'll wrap up today's video. My little dude's about to get wrecked. I hope you found this little discussion on technology interesting. Thank you guys so much for watching. Take care of yourselves, and until next time, I will see you guys on the other side.